Next up, we are going to hear from Eric Lindberg. Eric is the founder and head honcho at Environmental Sentry Protection, LLC, where they work with internet landing installed device systems, aka Eyelids, that are utilized for boat landing surveillance and aquatic invasive species protection and work. And we are excited to have Eric with us today to share his story of what he's been working on in the Eyelids. So let me just pull up your PowerPoint, and Eric, if you can unmute yourself, you can take it from here. Great. And your PowerPoint is up, so please take it away.
That's great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time and the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the past 14 years that we've been helping out at the boat launches. I think my email was sent out on the chat, but there's another one that would reach me as well. So why don't we click next? So this is Lake Minnetonka, and we're going to go through a lot of these images very quickly here, but this is Gray's Bay that's choked off with milfoil. This is where it all started back in 1987, and I was on the lake at that time, and our bay got completely choked off with Eurasian water milfoil and rendered it pretty much unusable. Next. So everyone knows the impacts of aquatic invasive species. You have an impact to property value, you have the ongoing management costs, there's ecosystem disruption, and try and swim through that. It's not good. Next. I took this picture at one of the Wall Lake conferences on the beach at Green Bay, where there were 2-foot-high windrows of dead and decaying zebra mussels just covering the beach. Next. These are some boat lifts that were taken out of Green Lake after 1 year of the zebra mussel infestation being discovered. Next. According to a couple of Russian scientists, the game fish population in the Baltic lakes have been impacted by zebra mussels to the point where the predominant fish species are snakehead, round goby, and carp, which are the ones that eat zebra mussels. Next. In Minnesota and in Wisconsin, we see a huge impact from starry stonewort now, which is extremely difficult to manage and expensive to get after. Next. The trailers at the boat launches are covered with these fine threads, and it's interesting to go to lakes where you have these boaters that have launched and they come out with the plants, and they have not bothered to take the plants off the trailer, which would seem like an obvious time and an easy time to do it. Next. Flowering rush waste up in Lake Detroit that a homeowner pulled off of the shoreline for pickup by the city. Next. That one was taken out of Bass Lake with Eurasian water milfoil on the boat and trailer coming out. I presume this fellow cleaned off before he left the launch area. Next. Not only the studies that have been done in Wisconsin for property value impact, but we see that when we draw a circle around lakes and see how inexpensive they are on Mille Lacs, for instance, where it didn't used to be the case. Next. These are old figures here. I know they've gone up quite a bit, especially on Lake Minnetonka, where they do both harvesting every 2 weeks with the Eurasian water milfoil and the chemical treatments. So it's expensive to wait for the management foot to come down and not prevent it. Next. And in Florida, they've already lost most of their lakes to infestation with hydrilla, 85% 0.7% at the time I did that slide. I'm sure it's much higher now. Next. Minnesota Public Radio had a nice tool, and I think they still have a nice tool on their website where you can plot the expansion of AIS. And so back in 1987, we had one lake in the Twin Cities with Eurasian water milfoil, Lake Minnetonka, and then going over to the right, you can see how it is trampolined out from that lake because there's so many boaters that move from Minnetonka to other lakes. Next.
By all accounts, when you start harvesting aquatic invasives, you've given up the fight. This is due to the fact that harvesting has to take place on a regular basis, and the very act of harvesting fragments the invasives, spreading them.
There we go. In fact, he sounds better than I do. We should just let him talk. But yeah, harvesting is kind of giving up the fight because it does fragment the plants. Next.
To new areas of the lake.
And then a lot of people, when they get Eurasian water milfoil or other aquatic plant AIS into the lake, have to rely on 2,4-D, which is expensive and probably not the first option. Next. Paid inspectors are kind of challenging to get out to the lakes. I think a lot of lakes over time have worn out their volunteers because a lot of people on the lake want to come up to the lake and enjoy their time there versus sit at the boat launch. But that's why we have Clean Boats, Clean Waters, which is an important program, but it can't cover all of the daylight hours per launch. So, and right now with the pandemic, I don't know how many lakes are actually doing Clean Boats, Clean Waters in-person inspections because of the risk. Next. We can see that boaters come to the launches at all hours from some of these statistics that we've gathered here. Next. So in summary, the visitors are going to come at all hours. We know that a higher percentage of the boats are going to launch plants. Zebra mussels spread by attaching to plants. Management costs are expensive, and we just can't get inspectors there all the time. Next. So 14 years ago, what I wanted to do was have a tool that would educate boaters at the point of use and leverage the Hawthorne effect, which is basically people's behaviors change when they know their actions are being monitored. And the challenge was, how do we do that continuously, covering the 2,500 daylight hours at a boat launch, and efficiently inspect all these launches? In other words, compress the amount of time between the launches. So you're only looking at the condition of the boat going in. And follow up with a consequence or reward for people that are seen cleaning off their boat and trailer and do it cost effectively. Next. So this has morphed a little bit over the course of 14 years. We've enhanced it over time, but this is the Eyelids. It leverages Verizon cellular connection that's wireless to transmit videos. It performs automated boat launch monitoring by leveraging a magnetic sensor to detect when a vehicle is present, which triggers a camera to look for motion, which triggers a controller to play a series of audio messages and send videos up into the cloud where they can be reviewed later. It's hardened tamper-proof enclosure. We use glass-clad polycarbonate and keyed bolts. We can remotely manage these systems for our customers, and the customers have access to the video history through their browser. Next. Here's a snapshot, because I'm such a nerd, of a controller that we had specifically designed to use in the unit. It integrates the solar controller, creating and charging 2 batteries, 12-volt batteries. We can record a series of messages on it. There is buttons for controlling it and a display, as well as a phone app for authorized people to use. And we control the devices, the camera and the audio and the modem, all separately with different controllers. We have operated these with an attached LED so we can illuminate the nighttime videos. Next. So we have over 75 sites now in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Here's just some snapshots of some of our customers that are posing with the unit. Next. So the customers access the website and they log in, they select the lake, they select the date range of the videos that they want to review, and then the videos are played back in a stream. Next. Part of our team does documentation of the videos, and we always review a portion of the videos that are captured for our customers. They're trained to look for aquatic plants being launched, and if they see any suspect AIS violations, they'll forward those to myself, and then I'll verify and forward those on to the customer or enforcement. We highlight the videos where, looking at their behavior, where people are checking under their boats for plants, and we share these reports with Google Docs so people can look at them in real time. Next. Here's a video that's going to play in a second as an example of some of the automated education that we have. So I'll turn it over to this guy who's narrating here.
Well, today we're going to take a look at replacing the speaker because the audio doesn't seem to be working with this unit. And we know this because when we press play, we hear nothing coming out. You got to make sure the volume is at least off of the minimum level before you press that play, and we hear nothing. So we should assume that spiders or old age have defeated our speaker.
That's one of the components that tends to be replaced more because the speaker is somewhat exposed to critters, or after a number of playbacks, it just wears out. So we had to do a video to document that. We have a number of videos out on YouTube for our customers to remember how to service the unit. And that battery stand is the eyelids with the controller and the camera and the batteries and the modem all included in it. Next.
Well, today we're going to
There we go. There's a couple of studies. We got started in 2006 where we noted, without putting any signage up, at Lake Minnetonka that 7.4% of the boats were launching plants. We posted the signage up that we were monitoring, and we noted that the violations dropped to 1.8%. And then by 2008, 0.13% of the boats at that launch were observed launching plants. So that was after some publicity generated a number of TV spots alerting people to what we were doing there. So it's all about making people aware and evidence of the Hawthorne effect as well. Next. Burnett County was our second grant that we received, first one in Wisconsin, where we put 7 launch sites up on 5 lakes. And we had the eyelids as just one of the tools as part of an AIS prevention program. And I need to stress that because it's not just one tool that you're using, it's publications, it's press releases, it's involving the local retailers. What we did is we had Clean Boats, Clean Waters inspectors at the launch along with the eyelids, and they were handing out Babe Winkleman brochures with a local map and a message about stopping the spread of AIS. When we saw boaters that were inspecting, we reported those to the sheriff, who forwarded on gift certificates to reward those people, and they were gift certificates to local establishments that were bait shops and so forth that were reinforcing the message as well. So it was an excellent example of a AIS prevention program leveraging a number of different elements. Next. We have an AIS risk calculator on our website, but depending upon your lake, when you run through that, it can get rather expensive depending upon what your littoral zone is and the possibility of a lake having a visitor come to it with AIS. Next. But we know boaters change their behavior when they understand their stake in it. We train them how to perform the task. It's convenient. But this is a multifaceted problem, and the Eyelids is a tool, but I think it's an important tool. Next. Here's an example of a boater, go ahead and play it, who reads the sign after hearing the message and decides that he's going to take action before he launches his boat by hopping out and checking underneath. Now, I'd like to say that every boater that we see on camera does this, but we do see very, very few boats launching plants. Next. And here's a boater who has pulled out with obvious plants dangling under the axle as his vehicle pulls forward. And that was the first video that we captured. In the subsequent video, you can see that the plants have been removed and thrown onto the pavement, which is what we want. Next. There is a video highlight link on YouTube. I don't know if this PowerPoint is going to be available such that people can click on it, but it's probably also on our website, lakesentry.net or environmentalsentry.us. I can paste that link into the chat when I'm done talking here so that people can go to it. Next. So we know that boaters transport AIS. We see that when we do studies and we find Eurasian water milfoil at the boat launch, and they use the lakes around the clock. We know property values are impacted, and it's very expensive to manage it. Inspectors can't cover all the time, so this is a tool that helps cover the balance of it by making people aware and changing their behaviors. Next. I think I covered all of these. We can identify the registration number on the boat as it launches. We can measure the peak periods when people come, and we document that in the report. Within an hour, there's an access to the launch transactions for the reviewers to take a look at, or the customers. And you get insight into people's behaviors to plan improvements. On one of our customer sites, there was a confrontation between a Clean Boats, Clean Waters inspector and a boater who was asked to use decontamination, which is a requirement in Washburn County and Burnett County. The sheriff leveraged that to cite the individual because they refused to do decontamination. So, you know, we work with enforcement, both conservation officers as well as the local sheriff's department. Next. So that's the summary of it. There's my contact information and my phone number. I see some questions popping up. Why don't I jump in and try and cover some of these? A lot of the lakes in Wisconsin did receive grants from the AIS fund to support the acquisition of the equipment. And vandalism question, there hasn't been vandalism since someone has stolen a solar panel that was not locked down years ago. Occasionally there'll be someone that will nick the housing. So that's not a huge deal. I have other reports that I can share. I see some questions coming up about the long-term effectiveness. I think one of the things I would share is one of our customers does not have audio on Bone Lake on their north side launch, and they compare that with the south launch. And we see a lot more violations on the north side launch. So the audio aspect is very important for making sure that users are aware. Not sure where I'm at on time, Pat.
We're kind of right up against our break here, Eric.
Okay.
But as you see there, the website for Eric is on the screen, as well as I think he's willing to put his email into the chat box and encourage you to communicate with Eric if you have additional questions. And Eric, thank you so much for sharing the story of what you've been up to over these 14 years using these Eyelid systems.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
With that, folks, so we're up against the break here, folks. We're going to take a 20-minute break, and we'll come back.